I don't know, but I felt like I was playing at a level above people. Everything's magnified with the Grand Slams. They become bigger. The other tournaments are sort of also rans. You try to crystallize it at the right moment, and then it just is the perfect opponent to sort of just squash him.
They always ask me about Björn. They always ask about Wimbledon '80. They always ask about the fire and ice of the rivalry everyone remembers. But that's the easy question, the one everyone expects. Nobody ever asks about the moments that broke me, the players who made me feel completely helpless, like everything I knew about the game, every instinct, every tactic, every ounce of preparation meant nothing. Have you ever faced someone who made you question everything you thought you knew about yourself? Today, I'm naming 6 of them. 6 opponents who didn't just beat me, they forced me to confront something deeper, my own limits. Some of these names will shock you. Some will make sense. But all of them shaped the way I played, and lost, in ways nobody ever talks about. Buckle in. This isn't a story about victories, and this is about the matches that haunt you. Number 1. Bjorn Borg. Let me start with Björn, and I want to be absolutely clear about something before I say another word. Bjorn Borg was my greatest rival, not my toughest opponent, my greatest rival. And that distinction matters more than people realize, so stay with me here. Before I even got on tour, I used to watch him. This Swedish kid with the headband and the long hair, girls screaming outside the locker room.
He had this aura about him. It was amazing. You know, I used to watch Wimbledon on TV, and all these hundreds of girls were hoarding around him when he exited the locker room.
Walking around every court he stepped on like he'd already won before the warm-up was finished. I remember sitting there thinking, I want some of that. I want to be that guy. He was my hero before he was ever my opponent. I looked up to him. I studied him. I wanted what he had. And then we started playing with each other. And that's when everything got very, very complicated. Here's what made Björn so incredibly difficult to play against. It wasn't the forehand. It wasn't the footwork. It wasn't the baseline game that everyone always talks about. It was the fact that the man felt absolutely nothing. Or at least, that's exactly how it looked from the other side of the net. You could not get inside his head because there was simply no door to knock on. Every single psychological weapon I had, the theatrics, the intensity, the emotional pressure I could build in a stadium until the whole place was vibrating, none of it touched him. Zero. Nothing. I built my entire game, my entire on-court persona, around the idea that I could affect the moment, that I could make the crowd feel something, that I could make my opponent feel something. And with every other player on tour, it worked. With Bjorn, I had absolutely nothing. He just stood there at the baseline, hitting the ball back, again and again and again, calm, cold, unreachable. And here's the strangest part of the whole thing. He is the only opponent I never once lost my temper against. Not once in my entire career. Something about him made me want to be better. Not just play better. Actually be better as a person. I remember a moment in New Orleans in '79. I was being a jerk on court, which, look, wasn't exactly unusual for me back then. And Bjorn actually called me up to the net. I walked over thinking he was going to lecture me, tell me to cut it out, give me some big speech. Instead, he put his arm around my shoulder and said, "Just enjoy yourself." My first instinct was that he was messing with my head. But later, I understood. That was just Bjorn. And that was who he actually was. The 1980 Wimbledon final.
Wimbledon 1980, the 5th set of the men's final. McEnroe serving at 6-7. Bjorn Borg needs only one break.
I had him. I genuinely, absolutely believed I had him. That 4th set tiebreak, I could taste it. I thought I was going to win that match and change everything. Instead, he found another gear, the way only Björn could, and he took the fifth. It still sticks with me. A year later, I finally beat him at Wimbledon, and just a few months after that, at 26 years old, with 11 Grand Slams, he simply walked away. I called him. I told him the game needed him. I told him I needed him. He was already gone. He made me a better player, and I would have given up the #1 ranking to keep playing him. Number 2. Jimmy Connors. Jimmy and I did not like each other. I think we both knew it. I think the whole world knew it. And honestly, and this took me years to admit, that friction is exactly why our matches were so extraordinary.
Trying as hard as Jimmy Connors. So I definitely, again, with him, I hope that I made him better, and I know he made me better.
Why do you think you guys didn't like each other?
With Björn, there was respect and admiration running underneath everything, even in the heat of battle. With Jimmy, there was none of that. It was just friction. Pure, ugly, beautiful friction. And it made for tennis that was unlike almost anything else I was ever part of. But here is the thing I had to learn, and it took me longer than it should have. Jimmy Connors was genuinely, deeply, frighteningly difficult to beat. Not because of some magical technique. Not because he had the most elegant game on tour. He didn't. What Jimmy had was something you simply cannot teach, cannot practice, and cannot fake. He refused to lose. Every single point, every single game, every single set, Jimmy came at you like it was the last thing he would ever do on this earth. No moment was too small. No point was a throwaway. You could be up 2 sets, and Jimmy was still running down balls that had absolutely no business being retrieved. Still fighting, still pushing, still making you feel like you hadn't won a single thing yet. I used to stand in front of the mirror before matches against him and ask myself one honest question. Am I trying as hard as Jimmy? And the truthful answer, more often than I'd like to admit, was no. The only player I've ever seen who brought that same extraordinary level of relentless effort, maybe even slightly more, was Rafa Nadal. And even then, it's close. I've said publicly that Jimmy and I didn't like each other, and I meant it. But I've also said this, and I meant it just as much. I always respected him. Every time I walked off court after beating Jimmy Connors, I knew I had genuinely earned it. There were no gifts from that man. Not one, ever. I hope I made him better. But I know without any doubt that he made me better. And sometimes, your enemies teach you far more than your closest friends ever could. Number 3. Ivan Lendl. Ivan and I were never going to be friends. That was clear from very early on. We were two completely opposite ideas about what tennis was supposed to look like.
Ivan Lendl serving at 5-3 in the second. Wow, what a shot.
I believed in touch, in feel, in reading a moment and doing something completely unexpected with it. Ivan believed in hitting the ball harder than the last time, and then harder than that, until you simply ran out of answers. And here's the part I hate admitting. On clay, I always ran out of answers. What made Ivan so difficult was not that he was more talented than me. I don't believe that. What made him impossible on slow surfaces was that he had no off switch, no emotional lever you could pull, no moment where you could feel him hesitating, or doubting, or wavering even slightly. He just processed the situation in front of him and kept going. Like a machine that had been built specifically, deliberately, to make my life miserable on slow courts. Yeah, I called him a robot publicly. I said it more than once. And look, I'm not completely taking it back, but maybe robots are very hard to beat. Maybe I should have been a little more robotic myself instead of relying on inspiration and instinct every single day. Paris, 1984. French Open Final. I was having arguably the greatest season any tennis player had ever put together, and I was playing out of my mind. I came out in that final and played some of the best tennis of my life through the first 2 sets. I had Ivan exactly where I wanted him. Everyone in that entire stadium knew it was over. And then a cameraman moved at precisely the wrong moment. My concentration broke for 1 second.
McEnroe is going to take his heart into a bundle, and that's the serve that appears to be an ace. The camera can lie sometimes, but he's still got a lot of trouble.
1 fraction of a second. And Ivan, being Ivan, felt the shift immediately and never let go of it. The crowd that had been roaring for me when I walked out slowly turned, point by point, game by game, toward him. When I lost that 5th set, I walked off the court without turning around. I couldn't. Roland Garros was the one Grand Slam I never won, the one that got away every year. And Ivan Lendl is the biggest reason for that. He beat me for a whole decade on clay. And that is the truth, as much as it hurts to say it out loud. For number 4, Boris Becker. Let me tell you about one day in Hartford, Connecticut, in 1987. Because if you want to understand exactly why Boris Becker is on this list, you really only need to know about that one afternoon. Davis Cup, United States versus Germany. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Whoever lost was getting relegated out of the world group. I was the American, playing at home, the crowd entirely behind me. Boris was 19 years old, had just lost shockingly early at Wimbledon, and had absolutely nothing to lose. Nobody gave him much of a chance, including, honestly, me. I came out sharp. I took the first set comfortably. We got deep into the second, and I had him. I was leading 10 games to 9, and there was a backhand volley. The kind of shot I had made 10,000 times in my career. Easy. Automatic. Well, the kind of volley you don't even think about. I missed it. And in that exact moment, something shifted. Boris felt it. I felt it. The entire building felt it. He said afterward that was the moment he realized I was, in his words, getting shaky. And he was absolutely right. Because once I missed that volley, something left me that I couldn't get back for the rest of that match. We played for 6 hours and 21 minutes. 6 hours. The second set alone lasted nearly 2.5 hours. By the time it was over, Boris had won, and the United States was relegated from the world group for the first time in history. I left everything on that court. Every single thing I had. What made Boris so dangerous was not just the serve, though the serve was absolutely enormous. It was the fearlessness. He played every single point like he had nothing to protect and everything to gain. That kind of raw, fearless energy from a 19-year-old is almost impossible to prepare for. Sometimes everything you have is just not enough, especially when the man across the net. Number 5, Stefan Edberg. Now here's one that might genuinely surprise people. Stefan. Not because Stefan wasn't great, he absolutely was, but because when you look at the overall record between us, it looks reasonable, competitive, like 2 guys who split things pretty evenly across the years. And on paper, that's sort of true. But here is exactly what the paper doesn't tell you. In the matches that mattered most,
it means the world in many ways, but it's a dream. It's a huge achievement and something that I feel extremely proud of, and not many people have reached that level.
On grass, at Grand Slams, and in the moments where everything was on the line, Stefan had the edge. And that is what I actually remember. Here's what made it so uniquely, specifically frustrating. Stefan and I played essentially the same game, same instincts, same net approach, same fundamental belief that the point should end quickly and at the net. With Björn, I couldn't crack an emotional wall. With Ivan, I couldn't outlast the machine. With Stefan, I couldn't out-execute the man who was executing exactly what I was trying to execute at exactly the same time. That is a very particular kind of maddening. And what made it even stranger? We share something that no other two players in the history of this sport can claim. But we are the only two men to have simultaneously held the #1 ranking in both singles and doubles. Two versions of the same player. Except his version kept beating mine on grass, which happened to be my favorite surface and the place I felt most completely at home in the world. Wimbledon, 1989. I was coming back strong, playing some of my best tennis in years, genuinely believing this could be my tournament again. Stefan stopped me in the semifinals. The most frustrating thing about playing someone who plays your own game back at you, you cannot complain about their style. Because it is your style. He was calmer than me, more consistent than me, and he did it all without ever letting me see inside him. The numbers look okay for me overall, but in the moments that mattered most, he was ahead. Number 6. Pete Sampras. Everyone assumes the answer to toughest opponent is Bjorn, and I understand why. The rivalry, the matches, the history, it's all right there and it's legendary. But I already told you, Björn was my greatest rival. Toughest? The one I've had decades to sit with and think about is Pete Sampras. I know. Pete and I were both Americans, both loved Wimbledon, both believed in attacking the net and finishing points as quickly as possible. On the surface, we should have been cut from exactly the same cloth. And in some ways, we were.
One man ruled Wimbledon for nearly a decade. Winner of 53 matches from 54 played from 1993 to 2000, Pete Sampras made center court his very own backyard.
But here is where it gets complicated. Pete arrived on tour just as I was entering the later years of my career. I was in my early 30s, and he was 19, 20 years old. And from the very first time we played each other, I felt something I was genuinely not used to feeling on a tennis court. Completely and utterly helpless. His serve was unlike anything I had ever faced in my life. And I had faced some enormous servers across my career. But Pete's was different in a way I still struggle to fully explain. It wasn't just the pace, it was the placement, the variety, the absolute complete confidence with which he could hit any spot in the service box at any moment in any situation. My entire game was built around reading the situation, taking time away from my opponent, controlling the net, dictating the point before it even developed. Pete's serve took all of that away from me before the point even started.
Here's the 5th set.
Yet again, to serve to save the match.
It felt like having the racket taken directly out of my hands before I could even lift it. I've said that before, and I will say it again, because there is simply no better way to describe what it felt like to stand on the other side of the net from him. It didn't matter what I tried, it didn't matter what adjustments I made or how many times I went back to the drawing board. He served big, he hit the ball hard, and I simply could not do my thing. And here is the part that really, genuinely stings. I never beat him. Not once. 0. Across every match we played at every stage of our careers, I could not find the answer. Not a single time. With Boris, I could at least explain it to myself. I was older. He was fearless and young and had nothing to lose. With Pete, there was no comfortable explanation available. He was not reckless, and he was not lucky. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he executed it perfectly. Later, at an exhibition, someone asked me the same question you're effectively asking right now. I didn't hesitate for even a second. Of all the players I ever faced, Pete Sampras was the toughest. I meant every single word. Some losses teach you something useful about yourself. That one just reminded me that time only moves in one direction. And Pete arrived at exactly the wrong moment for me. 6 names, 6 mirrors, 6 versions of myself I wasn't ready to face. And yet, each one left a mark I carry to this day. The rivalries, the losses, the lessons, they never really end. They echo. They shape you. They wait. So here's the question I leave you with. When your toughest opponent stares back from the mirror, will you see them? Or will you see yourself? Because the story doesn't stop here. It's only getting darker, sharper, and more relentless. And the next chapter? It might just redefine everything you thought you knew about greatness.